So then, we are back with more understanding from the time of the second tabernacle services from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Yahweh, recorded many centuries ago, where we find then ourselves during the time of restoration, and restoration of the holy cities, because YershiYahu then, the 61st chapter, indicate the returning of the holy cities after the 1,000 years of Nahashetans was then completed, and then the most important focus at the moment is understanding then the first holy tabernacle set beyond the rivers of Ethiopia on a land of Cush. That's kind of in the central northern part of Africa. That's why then at the moment Africa is being a country or a set of countries where you can find then this land of Cush, as it was then a country in the past, but became then divided in many areas of then Rwanda, Congo, and then areas of Sudan. And we can understand also the importance of this holy city as then bringing the people of Yahweh, those who are then saved in the Messiah, and then restarting these holy cities, and then giving the last directives before the end of this age. Per the prophecies we can understand from YershiYahu, and also from the Messiah, then and also from Yohanan, gave us a timeline based upon then Daniel the prophet regarding then the time of the end. As we understand it from the scripture, after the ascension of the Messiah, we find then the first 1,000 years where then his people was given then directives, and it started truly when then the first city was then activated during the time of Yohanan. And then from then on, many of the countries of the region were directed, and many would then obviously would come to their presence, then requesting inquiries, and then Yahweh gave them directives. So then after 1009, with the destruction of the holy city, and also the destruction of the tomb, then started 1,000 years of the seat, and ended in 0809. And then we are returning to the holy cities. That's why Africa is having a huge comeback in terms of then the world's news. It's because there is a shift in the spiritual understanding of the entire planet regarding then directives given to nations where they find themselves solidly placed in the Messiah, in understanding what it means of receiving directives yet from the kingdom to come government. So then we find the land of Cush, where then the first holy tabernacle is going to be at, and then comparing what it means of this holy tabernacle and what it means of people being linked with in a spirit, where their souls then begin to rest in terms of this age while the people were doing the work of this time, then receiving the prosperity as a result of the building of the holy city, because what it means is similar of what then the Ark of the Covenant when came from the land of the Philistines, and then the Ark was brought to Beth Shemesh when the people were gathering the wheat harvest, and then they found the holy Ark drawn by those animals. And then, wheresoever the ark went, there was a prosperity linked with it. So we find then the holy tabernacles, places where then the arks are going to be in, bringing prosperity as long as the nations, they hear what Yahweh has to say. So then, we find during these times many topics are coming up as the end comes. And then we understand for the prophecies, we understand maximum of 20 years left yet in this age. Per the calculations, you find the first 1,000 years, the other 1,000 years. So then Yohanan, when he was then explaining these prophecies regarding then the time of the end, the vengeance, he began then to prophesy in Revelation, the 10th chapter, 10th verse, was the only time he went out then to give those directives, and from there he was taken to the island. It was very abrupt, it was very quick, and then he was sentenced very fastly, and then he was sent to the island of Patmos. From there he never wrote. So then we know the gravity of the situation when then the holy cities are around. In terms of then those who are then contrary to this understanding, because they do not want Yahweh giving directives. However, the time and the season absolutely demands the holy cities, so they are returning, liking it or not. So then the world has reached a certain level where the holy cities are absolutely the utmost importance, because knowledge has increased as per then the directives of Daniel. YershiYahu has stated then the returning of the holy cities, and then later the city, and then the refurbishment of the temple. And then these areas, as the world then is developing and changing the system, then the holy cities are the utmost importance to maintain a level of sanity amongst the nations. The reason why it is so required is because the knowledge bases are increasing so much, technology is becoming so much available, and the grasp for control is so great, must have the cities to calm them down. So then we find the first city in Africa, because then the Africans back during the time of Shimon, they were very loyal. That's why then we find in this area of Cush the first holy tabernacle. As contrary of with many people were thinking in terms of Africans not being trustworthy, they are wrong. They were very loyal, and they were then the utmost danger of the time when then other kings came to power, and they damaged the relationship set up by Yahweh himself through Shimon. From then on, Africa was then wars and fights ever since. So there is this eager desire of Africans to reaching the harmony point as they experienced during the time of Shimon. And these areas are returning, showing the handwork of Yahweh through their multitude of problems via then the holy cities. Then we understand we have maximum of 20 years, from 20 to 22 the very maximum of time left yet in this planet. There are many talks of climate change and many other areas related with it, but it is not relevant. Yahweh has not mentioned a word regarding climate management. He is speaking of his people managing the many thousands upon thousands of Gentiles coming to the Messiah and receiving then salvation. So then the focus is changing truly of what the true words of the Messiah he spoke during the time of his presence in the earth. So then we find ourselves trying to resolve this problem with the climate change, and it won't change. It simply won't. It's not the priority of the Holy Scriptures and the salvation plan. The time is extremely short. There is so much to do in the next 20 years. And as you can observe, no way in this earth they can ever be able to reverse then the climate change because of the chemical changes in the atmosphere. It is very delicate, and then it was set this way because this age must end in a certain way. And Yahweh already has set these parameters, and the chemical changes of the atmosphere is not going to be interfered by any human activity. So then we find ourselves focusing in what is truly important, understanding what Yahweh Yeshua said, and what we should do in terms of bringing Gentiles to the Messiah. In other words, having the city ready and have the people of the cities teaching the word as Yahweh has intended it. So then, first 1,000 years already gone. the second 1,000 years is already gone. Then we have then reached, ever since 08, 09, the time of restoration and reduction of the same time. Many people, they have the time of restoration in mind, but they were never able to figure what it meant, the time of reduction. So now they understand. The second section of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings is the autumn feast, 490 days. After 08, 09, then we've entered the reduction and restoration. Reduction from 2031, because we find then, obviously, from the Creator's calendar, the Messiah then, he was born in 4999. He was placed on a pole in 5031. Then you begin to understand what it meant when the Messiah then was placed on a pole. We had 5031, 5032. It depends of the amount of time related with his time when he spent with the Samaritans a year before, so makes it in 5032, placed on a pole rather than 5031. The main idea of this calculation is then the rough estimate we must make, because our time is not precisely then as per the Creator's calendar, but we have an idea what it means in the coming of the prophecies and the shifting. And sometimes during the shifting takes a bit of time. So for sake of the time as per what they are as numbers, he was then born in 4999 and placed on a pole 5032. That's why then we find ourselves during the time of 7012, and then 20 years later become 7032. So then we find during this time a shift of at least couple of years you can give and take. So then when the Messiah was placed on a pole in 5032, let's say for numbers sake, always given a slack of a year or two, but 5032 number wise, then we can understand what it meant when the Messiah then ascended, and then his people then were given the task and the mandate then to transfer the information the Messiah had given them, so then they would start up holy cities. Started out as then simply explaining the Holy Scripture, and then his people were then receiving Ruach HaKodesh, and they were gathering. First were then gatherings, then later in Yohanan's time was the first holy city, perfectly put together as per instructions. And this holy city of the time of Yohanan is going to be then rebuilt in the land of Cush. Quite frankly, we have no yet prophets of Yahweh from the holy cities, so we must understand it's a place of Congo, Rwanda, and Sudan. Somewhere around that area is going to have the Holy Tabernacle. Without asking the holy prophet, more than likely would be Congo, because of the vast extreme reaches of the area brings the most violence, the most disorganization, and would be the obvious place where Yahweh would set his holy tabernacle to help the people go through this tremendous time of change with organization and peace. Only Yahweh can provide it. So then we find ourselves during our time after 2,000 years. So then the Messiah, he was placed on a pole 5032, and he spent time with the Samaritans 5031. From 5031 you counted in 2,000 years, 1,000 for his people, 1,000 for Nahashtan, and ended then in 08, 09. So then from the time of the Messiah 5031, 2,000 years would be 7031 as per the Creator's calendar's counting. Some of the people, they say it can last for more than 1,000 years, and then after the 7. But then you have to understand, regular counting starts with 0 and then 1,000. in Hebraic understanding, you already start with 1,000. That's why there is a bit of a slack of a time, and you have to count then another 1,000 if you then start with 0. So if you start counting with 0 as normal, for us normal, but not normal for Yahweh because he starts with 1,000, then we have to place another 1,000 at the end. If we start with 1,000 as it should be, then we are in 7012. So then we begin to understand what it means until 7031. Has to have a lot of information coming in and also a lot of activity then to complete this age. So we have around 20 years, the very most, from 20 to 22 years maximum. A give and take of 2 years. And then the age closes. And the Messiah gave us then very important warnings then in Luke, stating the parable regarding then his part and then the part of the Noah and also Lot. He gave other parables related with it that you can find a layer of understanding also in YershiYahu. But when he was speaking then of the time of the end, he precisely mentioned Noah, and during the time of Noah, people were giving into relationships, they were then having a family, building a house, building a barn, and then doing their trade, doing farming, and then the Messiah explains in the same level when Lot was then involved in being rescued from the city. Then they were giving relationships, then they were doing this, that, and the other. And a lot of people, they were unaware of the judgment coming. And they were caught by surprise. So some people, when they hear that the earth has maximum of 20 to 22 years left, a lot of people, they laugh. As it was during the time of Noah and Lot. The people, they were mocking. Because it was so out of the ordinary, and then the Messiah was explaining there is 1,000 years, the other 1,000 years. The Messiah is already gone for 2,000 years in terms of ascended to heaven. And he's going to return then later. And he gave then the time, and then the time expires in 20 to 22 years. And that's it. There is no more time. But the Messiah said, though he knew the prophecy would end at a certain point, yet the people would be then absolutely oblivious of the holy prophecy. They would be given to relationships and building a home and having problems in the government and then resolving the problems and would have family problems. And then, as during the time of Noah or Lot, came the time and judgment came. So don't be surprised when you are explaining the holy prophecies, people begin to mock, because precisely what the Messiah said. These are no news. They are only refreshments. The Messiah already explained the entire Torah from Aleph to Tau. He explained the entire prophecies, the entire Torah, the revelations, the oracles. He was the Torah himself while walking in the earth. He gave directives to his people. They start out the cities, and they gave directives, and then the cities were destroyed, and then we are during the time of restoration of the holy cities, and whatsoever we will do in the future was already practiced in the past, and the Messiah has tailor-made information for each nation of this time. These are only the great news, tailor-made because the Messiah gave functions to his people, and they will function in the 7 spirits of Yahweh. Then each of the nations coming and making inquiries of Yahweh, they will receive special information related specific for them. These are the only news we have. In terms of the procedure until reaching the areas of giving those directives, it's already laid in place, absolutely solid rock. There is no new information regarding how to activate this system. So then we find ourselves then believing what the Messiah said, and then always pointing the focus at the moment in Africa. the whole world should be absolutely focusing in what from Africa is coming then when this holy city, the first holy city ever since the time of Yohanan, then is going to be placed, constructed, and then functioning as per such, per Moses' instructions. Then we find obviously later other prophecies being then completed. While the world then is going to have the shifting of the world's market so much in shambles at the moment, and then when the time comes then the specialized computer system and the economical system of China, then each individual with a computer in their homes would be able to do trade with China. That's where then in the level of the Gentiles, the economical stability is going to be reached because of the Chinese system, while each nation is going to maintain their own individuality. Thus what then Daniel said, nations would try then to come together prior of this time. They would try to make an economical system of their own based on what they thought was then guided by Yahweh or God or any other God, would not be then adhering to each other. So the Eurozone is going to be destroyed. If you begin to evaluate, Daniel said, nations would be strong, nations would be weak. They would try to come together and adhere to each other, and they could not. So they are going to start then going back to their old ways, yet they are going to maintain their individualities while have the Chinese system through their own system, and they are going to reap the benefits from. While then Africa is going to be involved with the most important event of our time after 1,000 years. It is extremely important having then people over there preparing the way for the holy city. So the world is going through a lot of changes, and the people of Yahweh must always emphasize this point, very important for the world to understand the holy cities. So then in later time, we will find then the continent of Africa being organized only because Yahweh in His true understanding and His mercy could put together a plan, such neat plan, where He finds Himself in the amongst of the fierce, yet being truthful to His holy prophecies. So it's a tremendous time where we can understand what He meant, we can understand the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, we understand we have maximum of 20 to 22 years, and then lots of prosperity coming for the nation of Africa. As long as they understand the principles of Yahweh, the principles of the Torah, and understand what the city means, giving directives to the nations. No liar is going to be there, you can be sure of it. So then we find ourselves during this time, and then focusing in first, finding the holy city, determining the site, building it, and then afterwards being very concerned with then the Chinese system coming and then uniting the nations via a system, while each nation would then be treated as individuals because it must be in line with the prophecy of Daniel. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.